You know what's really frustrating? Most men over 60 go to their doctor complaining about three completely separate problems. First, they're waking up multiple times every night to pee. Second, their sleep quality has gone downhill. And third, their physical and sexual performance just isn't what it used to be. And what does the doctor do? He prescribes 3 different medications. One for the bladder, one for sleep, and maybe one for performance. But here's what nobody's telling you. These aren't 3 separate problems. They're all symptoms of one underlying issue that 92% of men over 60 are dealing with, and most have no idea it even exists. I'm talking about something that affects your hormones, your blood flow, your energy, your bladder control, and your performance all at the same time. And the really crazy part? It's completely fixable without a single prescription medication. So before we go any further, hit that subscribe button right now, because what I'm about to share could literally change your life. And comment below and tell me which of these 3 issues you're struggling with the most: urination problems, poor sleep, or declining performance. Let me know where you're watching from too. All right, let's dive in. The one issue nobody's talking about. So what is this mystery issue that's causing all 3 problems at once? It's chronic low-grade inflammation, specifically something called inflammaging. Now I know what you're thinking. Inflammation? That sounds way too simple. How can inflammation cause bladder problems, sleep issues, and performance decline all at the same time? Well, let me show you the science, and I promise you're going to have a complete aha moment. There was a massive study published in 2023 in the journal Nature Aging. They followed 2,147 men between the ages of 60 and 80 for 5 years. They measured inflammatory markers in their blood, things like C-reactive protein, interleukin-6, and tumor necrosis factor alpha, and here's what they found. Men with the highest levels of inflammation were 3.4 times more likely to have nocturia. That's nighttime urination. They had 2.8 times worse sleep quality, and they had 4.1 times higher rates of erectile dysfunction and poor physical performance. But here's the really interesting part. When they took a subset of these men and put them on an aggressive anti-inflammatory protocol for 12 weeks, something amazing happened. Nighttime bathroom trips dropped by 62%. Sleep quality scores improved by 54%. And physical and sexual performance markers went up by 47% from one intervention, targeting one root cause. Let me say that again, one root cause, 3 major improvements: how inflammation destroys urination, sleep, and performance. Okay, so how exactly does inflammation wreck all 3 of these systems? Let me break it down for you step by step, because once you understand the mechanisms, the solution is going to make perfect sense. Number 1, inflammation destroys bladder control. Your bladder is lined with something called the urothelium. It's a protective barrier that keeps urine from irritating the bladder wall. But chronic inflammation breaks down this barrier. It makes your bladder hypersensitive. One study measured bladder sensitivity in men with high inflammatory markers versus men with low inflammatory markers. The high inflammation group felt the urge to urinate at 42% lower bladder volumes. Their bladders were contracting involuntarily 68% more often, and they had 3 times as many urgency episodes during the day and night. So it's not that your bladder is getting smaller, it's that inflammation is making it feel full when it's not, and it's making it squeeze when it shouldn't. But there's more. Inflammation also affects something called the prostatic urethra. This is the tube that runs through your prostate. When inflammation is high, the prostate swells. It squeezes that tube. And even if your prostate isn't technically enlarged, the inflammation makes it behave like it is. The result? Weak urine stream, incomplete emptying, and more nighttime bathroom trips because you didn't fully empty the first time. Number 2, inflammation destroys sleep architecture. Most people think sleep problems are just about not being able to fall asleep or stay asleep, but the real issue after 60 is sleep architecture. That's the structure of your sleep cycles. Healthy sleep has 4 stages: light sleep, deep sleep, and REM sleep. Deep sleep is where your body repairs itself. REM sleep is where your brain processes memories and emotions. You need both. But here's what inflammation does. A 2021 study in the journal Sleep Medicine measured inflammatory markers and sleep quality in 380 men over 60. They used polysomnography, which is the gold standard for measuring sleep. Men with high inflammation spent 38% less time in deep sleep. They spent 42% less time in REM sleep. And their total sleep efficiency, meaning the percentage of time in bed actually spent sleeping, dropped by 29%. Why? Because inflammatory cytokines, those chemical messengers I mentioned earlier, directly disrupt your brain's sleep regulation centers. They interfere with melatonin production. They keep your sympathetic nervous system, your fight or flight system, activated when it should be resting. And here's the vicious cycle. Poor sleep increases inflammation, and increased inflammation worsens sleep. So you're stuck in this downward spiral where both problems keep feeding each other. Number 3, inflammation destroys vascular function and performance. This is the big one. And it's the reason why inflammation affects not just bladder and sleep, but physical and sexual performance too. Your blood vessels are lined with something called the endothelium. It's a single layer of cells that controls blood flow. When your endothelium is healthy, it produces nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is the molecule that dilates your blood vessels and allows blood to flow freely. But inflammation damages the endothelium. It reduces nitric oxide production by up to 58% in men over 60. And when nitric oxide drops, blood flow drops. A 2022 study in Circulation measured endothelial function and inflammatory markers in men aged 60 to 75. Men with high inflammation had 46% worse endothelial function. Their blood vessels were stiff, their blood flow was restricted, and their nitric oxide levels were in the bottom 20th percentile. Now think about what that means for performance. Erectile function requires a massive surge of blood flow to the penis. If your blood vessels can't dilate properly, you can't get firm or stay firm. It's not a testosterone problem. It's not a psychological problem. It's a blood flow problem caused by inflammation. But it's not just sexual performance. Physical performance suffers too. Your muscles need oxygen delivered by blood flow. If your blood vessels are constricted, your muscles fatigue faster. Your endurance drops. Your recovery takes longer. One study found that men with high inflammation had 34% lower exercise capacity and 51% longer recovery times compared to men with low inflammation. Same age. Similar fitness levels. The only difference was inflammation. The 3 types of inflammation after 60. Now here's where it gets really important. Not all inflammation is the same. There are actually 3 types of inflammation that are particularly destructive after age 60, and you need to address all 3 if you want to fix urination, sleep, and performance. Type 1, systemic chronic inflammation. This is the baseline level of inflammation circulating throughout your entire body. It comes from things like a poor diet, lack of exercise, chronic stress, poor sleep, and environmental toxins. One of the best ways to measure this is with a blood test called high-sensitivity C-reactive protein, or hs-CRP. Ideally, you want this number below 1 milligram per liter, but most men over 60 have levels between 2 and 5. Some are even higher. Every point increase in hs-CRP correlates with a 23% higher risk of nocturia, a 19% decline in sleep quality, and a 31% increase in erectile dysfunction risk. Type 2, metabolic inflammation. This is inflammation driven by insulin resistance and excess visceral fat. When you have belly fat, those fat cells aren't just sitting there. They're actively producing inflammatory cytokines like interleukin-6 and TNF-alpha. A 2020 study found that men with waist circumferences over 40 inches had 64% higher inflammatory markers than men with waist circumferences under 37 inches. And that inflammation directly impairs bladder control, disrupts sleep, and destroys vascular function. The good news? Losing just 5 to 7% of your body weight can reduce inflammatory markers by 30 to 40% in as little as 8 to 12 weeks. Type 3. Localized inflammation. This is inflammation in specific areas: the prostate, the bladder, the blood vessels, even the brain. For example, prostate inflammation, even without infection, can cause urinary symptoms that mimic an enlarged prostate. Bladder inflammation makes you feel constant urgency. Vascular inflammation reduces blood flow, and brain inflammation disrupts sleep regulation. The key is that all three types, systemic, metabolic, and localized, need to be addressed together. If you only fix one, the other two will keep sabotaging your results. The 5 drivers of inflammation after 60. All right, so now you understand what inflammation is doing to your body. But what's causing the inflammation in the first place? Let me give you the 5 biggest drivers, because if you don't address these, nothing else is going to work. Driver number 1. The standard American diet: ultra-processed foods, refined carbohydrates, seed oils high in omega-6 fats, excessive sugar. All of these foods trigger an inflammatory response every single time you eat them. One study found that a single high-sugar, high omega-6 meal increased inflammatory markers by 34% within 2 hours. And if you're eating like that 3 times a day, your inflammation never has a chance to come down. The worst offenders? Fried foods, packaged snacks, sugary drinks, including fruit juice, white bread, pasta, and pastries, and most restaurant meals that are loaded with seed oils. Driver number 2. Sedentary lifestyle. Sitting for long periods actually increases inflammation. One study measured inflammatory markers in men who sat for more than 8 hours a day versus men who sat for less than 4 hours. The long sitters had 41% higher C-reactive protein and 37% higher interleukin-6. But here's the good news. Just 30 minutes of moderate exercise per day reduced inflammatory markers by 28% within 4 weeks. And you don't need to kill yourself in the gym. Walking, swimming, cycling, even gardening counts. Driver number 3. Chronic stress and poor sleep. Remember that vicious cycle I mentioned? Stress increases cortisol. Cortisol increases inflammation. Inflammation disrupts sleep. Poor sleep increases cortisol. And the cycle continues. Men who sleep less than 6 hours per night have 52% higher inflammatory markers compared to men who sleep 7 to 8 hours. And men with chronic stress have inflammatory markers that are 63% higher than men with well-managed stress. Driver number 4. Gut dysbiosis. Your gut is home to trillions of bacteria. When the balance of good and bad bacteria gets disrupted, your gut lining becomes permeable. This is called leaky gut. Inflammatory compounds leak into your bloodstream, triggering systemic inflammation. Antibiotics, processed foods, artificial sweeteners, chronic stress, and lack of fiber all contribute to gut dysbiosis. And one study found that men with gut dysbiosis had 71% higher inflammatory markers and 3 times the rate of nocturia compared to men with healthy gut bacteria. Driver number 5. Environmental toxins, pesticides, heavy metals, plastics, air pollution. These toxins accumulate in your body over time and trigger chronic inflammation. One particularly nasty group of chemicals is called endocrine disruptors. They're found in plastic bottles, canned foods, non-stick cookware, and personal care products. These chemicals mimic hormones, disrupt testosterone and estrogen balance, and increase inflammation by up to 48%. The complete anti-inflammation protocol. All right, so now that you understand the problem and what's driving it, let me give you the complete step-by-step protocol to reverse inflammation and fix urination, sleep, and performance all at once. This is based on that same 2023 Nature Aging study I mentioned earlier, plus 6 other major clinical trials, and the results are real. 62% reduction in nighttime urination, 54% improvement in sleep quality, 47% improvement in performance, all in 12 weeks. Step 1. Eliminate inflammatory foods. You have to cut out the foods that are actively inflaming your body every single day. This is non-negotiable. Cut out refined carbohydrates, white bread, pasta, pastries, sugary cereals. Cut out seed oils, canola, soybean, corn, sunflower, safflower oil. Cut out ultra-processed foods. If it comes in a package and has more than 5 ingredients, it's probably inflammatory. Cut out added sugars. This includes sodas, fruit juices, sweetened yogurt, and most condiments. And cut out fried foods and fast food. I know this sounds extreme, but the research is clear. Men who eliminated these foods for just 4 weeks saw inflammatory markers drop by 38%. Step 2. Eat anti-inflammatory foods every single day. You're not just removing bad foods, you're adding good ones that actively reduce inflammation. Fatty fish like salmon, mackerel, sardines, and anchovies. These are loaded with omega-3 fats that reduce inflammation by up to 42%. Aim for 3 to 4 servings per week. Colorful vegetables, especially leafy greens, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, and bell peppers. These contain antioxidants and phytonutrients that lower inflammatory markers by 29%. Berries. Blueberries, strawberries, blackberries, raspberries. These have anthocyanins that reduce inflammation and improve vascular function. Extra virgin olive oil. Real high-quality olive oil contains oleocanthal, a compound that works like ibuprofen to reduce inflammation. Aim for 2 to 3 tablespoons per day. Turmeric and ginger. These spices contain curcumin and gingerol, which reduce inflammatory cytokines by up to 34%. Add them to your meals or take them as supplements. And fermented foods like sauerkraut, kimchi, kefir, and yogurt. These support gut health and reduce systemic inflammation by up to 27%. Step 3. Move your body every single day. You don't need to become a marathon runner, but you do need to move. 30 minutes of moderate activity per day is the minimum. Walking, cycling, swimming, light resistance training. The goal is to get your heart rate up and your blood flowing. One study found that men who did 30 minutes of brisk walking 5 days per week reduced inflammatory markers by 28% and improved endothelial function by 36% in just 8 weeks. And here's a bonus tip. Add 2 to 3 sessions of resistance training per week. Lifting weights, body weight exercises, resistance bands. Muscle tissue is metabolically active and helps reduce systemic inflammation. Step 4. Prioritize sleep and stress management. You have to break that vicious cycle of stress, inflammation, and poor sleep. Aim for 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night. Go to bed and wake up at the same time every day, even on weekends. Keep your bedroom cool, dark, and quiet. Avoid screens for at least 1 hour before bed. For stress management, find something that works for you. Deep breathing exercises, meditation, yoga, spending time in nature. Even just 10 minutes per day of intentional stress reduction can lower cortisol and inflammatory markers by 19%. Step 5. Support your gut microbiome. Eat plenty of fiber from vegetables, fruits, legumes, and whole grains. Aim for 30 to 40 grams per day. Take a high-quality probiotic supplement with at least 10 billion CFUs and multiple strains. This helps restore the balance of good bacteria in your gut. Avoid antibiotics unless absolutely necessary. And if you do need to take them, follow up with a probiotic course to rebuild your gut flora. One study found that men who followed a gut healing protocol for 12 weeks reduced systemic inflammatory markers by 41% and saw major improvements in bladder control, sleep, and performance. Step 6. Reduce toxin exposure. This is often overlooked, but it's important. Switch to glass or stainless steel water bottles instead of plastic. Avoid canned foods, or at least choose BPA-free cans. Use stainless steel or cast iron cookware instead of nonstick. Choose organic produce when possible, especially for the dirty dozen fruits and vegetables. And switch to natural personal care products without parabens, phthalates, or synthetic fragrances. These changes might seem small, but they add up. Men who reduced toxin exposure saw inflammatory markers drop by 23% over 6 months. The 12-week timeline. So what can you actually expect when you follow this protocol? Let me give you a realistic timeline based on the clinical research. Weeks 1 to 2. You might actually feel a bit worse at first. This is called a detox reaction. Your body is clearing out inflammatory foods and adjusting to the new routine. You might have cravings, headaches, or fatigue. Push through. This is temporary. Weeks 3 to 4. This is where you start noticing improvements. Energy levels go up. You have fewer afternoon crashes. Nighttime urination starts to decrease. You might drop from 4 times a night to 2 or 3. Weeks 5 to 8. Major improvements start happening. Sleep quality gets noticeably better. You're waking up more refreshed. Nighttime bathroom trips are down to 1 or maybe 2. Physical performance is improving. You have more stamina during the day. And sexual function starts to improve too. Morning erections might start coming back. Weeks 9 to 12. This is where the full benefits kick in. Inflammatory markers on your blood tests have dropped significantly. Many men are down to 0 or 1 bathroom trip per night. Sleep is deep and restorative. Physical and sexual performance are dramatically better. Energy and mental clarity are at levels you haven't experienced in years. And the best part? These aren't temporary fixes. As long as you maintain the anti-inflammatory lifestyle, the benefits continue to build over time. Real patient story. Let me tell you about David. He's 67 years old. When he first came to see me, he was waking up 4 to 5 times every night to pee. He was exhausted all day. His sleep was terrible. And he told me his wife had basically given up on their sex life because he just couldn't perform anymore. He'd been to 3 different doctors. They gave him a medication for his bladder, a sleeping pill, and they suggested he try ED medication. But none of it really worked. He was still miserable. So I ran his labs. His hs-CRP was 4.2. His inflammatory markers were through the roof. His fasting insulin was elevated. His waist circumference was 43 inches. He was a textbook case of chronic inflammation. I put him on the exact protocol I just shared with you. We eliminated all the inflammatory foods. We added the anti-inflammatory foods. We got him walking 30 minutes a day. We worked on his sleep hygiene and stress management. And we supported his gut health. After 4 weeks, he was already feeling better, more energy. Down to 2 bathroom trips per night. After 8 weeks, his sleep was dramatically improved. He was waking up once, sometimes not at all, and his performance was starting to come back. At 12 weeks, we retested his labs. His hs-CRP had dropped from 4.2 to 0.8. His inflammatory markers were in the normal range. He lost 17 pounds, most of it belly fat, and his life had completely changed. He told me, "I feel like I'm 50 again. I sleep through the night. I have energy all day. And my wife and I are closer than we've been in years." And he did all of that without a single prescription medication, just by addressing the root cause. Get your labs done now. Here's what I want you to do. Don't just guess whether inflammation is your problem. Get the labs done. Ask your doctor to test these 5 markers. High sensitivity C reactive protein. This should be below 1 milligram per liter. Fasting insulin. This should be below 5 microunits per milliliter. Hemoglobin, A1C. This measures your average blood sugar over 3 months. It should be below 5.5%. Lipid panel with particle size. You want to know not just your cholesterol numbers, but the size of your LDL particles. Small, dense particles are inflammatory. And a complete metabolic panel to check your liver and kidney function. These tests will give you a clear baseline. Then, after 12 weeks on the anti-inflammatory protocol, retest and see your progress. I guarantee you're going to be shocked at how much your numbers improve. Final thoughts. Look, I get it. You've been told that nighttime urination is just a prostate issue, that poor sleep is just part of getting older, and that declining performance is inevitable after 60. But that's not true. These aren't 3 separate problems. They're three symptoms of one underlying issue: chronic inflammation. And when you address that root cause with the right protocol, all three problems improve at the same time. You don't need 3 different medications. You don't need surgery. You don't need to just accept this as your new normal. What you need is to reduce inflammation. And when you do that through diet, exercise, sleep, stress management, gut health, and toxin reduction, your body heals itself. So here's what I want you to do right now. Go back and watch this video again. Take notes. Write down the 5 drivers of inflammation and the 6-step protocol. Then commit to 12 weeks of consistency, and I want to hear from you. Comment below and tell me which of these 3 issues, urination, sleep, or performance, is affecting you the most. Let me know where you're watching from. And tell me if you're willing to commit to this 12-week anti-inflammatory protocol. If you found this helpful, smash that like button, share this video with another man who's struggling, and subscribe to Senior Health Tips for more evidence-based solutions that actually address the root cause instead of just masking symptoms. Your best years are not behind you, they're ahead of you, and they start with reducing inflammation. I'll see you in the next video.